Welcome everybody. Welcome to the fourth, right? I'm looking at Ulrika desperately. To the fourth Innovation Tuesday, organized as a part of the EIT E-Train project. And this stop of our train is actually about negotiations. Tonight we are continuing our conversation with Hobey and Tanya Colonna from Oro Muscles, and they are going to share their inside experience, tips, and tricks about negotiations. I love the introduction that Hobey did a couple of minutes ago when we were just starting this meeting. We said, we all come from different backgrounds, we all come from different families. And this training is maybe very familiar for people who had to negotiate a lot in their families. But for some of us, it's not really a given skill, not a skill that we learn in any other settings, in family settings, in school, in university. We usually learn to follow rules, to master a certain discipline, but we do not learn how to negotiate, what it means and what it takes. And this is the topic of today's session, today's Innovation Tuesday. And I would like to give word to Hobey and Tanya to take it away and tell us all about negotiations.
Before we begin, I think I'm just going to ask a very obvious question. What do you guys know about negotiations? What is negotiations to you?
Exchanging interests.
Exchanging interests. Okay. Can anyone expand on that? Win-win solutions. Good. Trying to create a win-win solution. Can someone describe maybe an experience that they had with negotiating?
Negotiating the salaries in the company when you're interviewing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All of you are students, right? Yes, I'm assuming. And all of you want jobs after you go to school? Yes, no, maybe? Or you just like to spend money?
Well, there is a yes in the chat.
Okay, one person said yes. So, okay. If you want a job after your school, you have to negotiate to some level, right? Because you have to negotiate your salary or pay. And you're probably going to negotiate either win if no collaboration later just to win a deal, or win-win if you want to collaborate later. Okay. So lots of winning. Negotiations are considered, it's like a competition. Okay. So I'm starting to understand more the branding or kind of what you guys are associating negotiations with. But I also do think that most of you realize that it's trying to create a win-win situation where you come to a fair agreement with another party. Okay. And so what are some examples of negotiation? So we said negotiating a salary. Can anybody else point to another example where you would have to negotiate? Wow, you guys have easy lives. You never have to negotiate.
I think like everyday task needs some kind of negotiation. For example, setting a meeting or just buying things in the grocery, or every day has its negotiation. The thing is, making deals, you're sometimes in the part that you don't want to give away something or the other part. So the deal is different.
Yeah. So anytime something is being valued, there is a negotiation, whether that is negotiating a research collaboration, determining a price or terms of a service or product, getting a dog, compromising instead of winning. Okay. Compromising is also, honestly, compromising and winning are kind of the same thing when it comes to negotiations. When I negotiate with my girlfriend on what to eat, you know, she has a set of requirements and I have a set of requirements, and we just eat whatever she wants anyway. Okay. She's a really good negotiator when it comes to that. When I negotiate with my dog, okay, a lot of people think that dogs cannot count. I guarantee you that if you get 3 treats out of their treat jar and then you only feed them 1, I guarantee you that dog can magically count now. Okay. He's negotiating how many treats can I get from you. Okay. And then if I ask him to sit or stand or do a trick, he's doing it for a treat. That's a negotiation. Okay. So Raul is correct. Pretty much everything we do is a negotiation, and every decision we make is some sort of cost benefit analysis, whether it's, you know, just because it's instinct, that just means that our AI is really good at doing that type of decision already, versus should I go to school or should I work? Should I take this job or should I continue a graduate degree? Those may take longer, but those are also self-negotiations with yourself where you're doing a cost-benefit analysis. And at the root of it, you're asking yourself, is this worth doing? Is this worth entering into? Okay. And so that's kind of underpinning everything that we're going to talk about today. Okay. So don't forget, the whole point and the why of a negotiation is to figure out what is fair value and if something is worth doing. That's the point of a negotiation process. All right. And so we're going to go through an example of a common way just to contextualize negotiations. And then we're going to walk through 2 of the biggest examples of negotiations. So 2 of the biggest negotiations that Tanya and I have gone through as an example. And I think that most technology companies have gone through these types of negotiations. And we're not going to get into too much of the details just because of time limitations, but we'll discuss them at a high level so we can at least cover it. Maybe in the future, you can ask, you as students, customers of the content, can put together a testimonial and say, hey, it'd be great if Hobey and Tanya put together a negotiation seminar, because we already have those that we teach in the US. We put together negotiation seminars and ask, hey, EIT Health, can you fund more workshops for us? And that'd be great. Okay. So, but today we'll keep it to these case studies. All right. So Tanya is going to share her screen, and we are going to see probably one of the most common examples of negotiations. Okay. Can anybody tell me what this is as soon as she shares her slides?
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
It is a house. Can anybody tell me how much they would pay for this house?
It probably depends on the location.
Okay.
I mean, it's super fancy, but
Yeah. So the fanciness of the house factors into the value. Location factors into the value. Okay. So how much would you pay for this house?
Court thinks not as much as they will want him to.
Okay. So probably not as much as the realtor wants to sell it to you for, right?
Yep. And I would probably not pay because I don't have that amount of money. I could maybe rent it for a weekend.
Okay. So your own personal budget also puts a limitation on value, right? Like the way I perceive value is not the same as a billionaire perceives value or what Jeff Bezos perceives as value, right? If this house cost €1,000,000, Jeff Bezos, he wouldn't even blink at that. But me, a peasant, would say €1,000,000, I'd rather dump that into my medical device company than buy a house. Okay. And so, yeah, so not as much as they will want me to. Okay. So you guys already inherently know that there's going to be a negotiation process to negotiate for this house. And based on a very long list of parameters. And that list is different from the buyer versus the seller, right? The seller is trying to look at how much value that they can get with this house. A buyer is trying to get the lowest price. And they have to negotiate together to figure out what is fair, okay? Now, this process happens all the time. Like when you go to the supermarket or the store to buy groceries, that negotiation, that price you see is a result of years and years and years of negotiating. Okay. Any price you see is the result of negotiations. All right. Now, if Tanya goes to the next slide. Would you pay more or less for housing inside of this apartment complex than the previous house?
The whole thing is probably less.
The whole thing is probably less. Olga has made her opinion very clear. She's a strong negotiator. As
It's a
you
steering
guys,
house here, right?
don't try to sell Olga a house because she will get you for every penny. Depends on location. Okay. So there's some type of perceived value here that's going on in saying, okay, there's smaller square footage. So there's more parameters to buying a house, and we're starting to build a list of requirements. Okay. And so something about the square footage, something about the fanciness of the house, something about the location of the house, something about, like, there's a lot of these parameters we're looking at. And then the seller has different parameters, and we somehow have to meet in the middle. And if Tanya goes to the next slide, we can look at something else. Okay. Now, which house at the point in time the picture was taken, which house would you pay more for? A house under construction or a house that already exists? Ultimately, with a question point?
I think it depends on when you're gonna move in. Can you wait till the house been built, or you just wanna in rush and move into the house and wanna pay higher? Your
So
timeline.
you're buying the house right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Olga says it's worth less because it's not finished. You don't know if you can actually live in it, which makes a lot of sense. Okay, so the value of a house, it also depends on how reliable is it. Is it still under construction, like the house on the left? Is it already built, working, and other people have already validated that it works inside, everything works? Okay, that factors into the price of the home as well, right? Okay. But if the location is very nice and it's going to value up in the future as an investment, it's sometimes the case. And that's kind of getting ahead of the conversation, but also understand you take on more risk, right? If you pay for an unfinished home versus a finished home, there may be more opportunity to gain, but there's also much more risk in that, hey, what if the construction workers don't finish the house ever? Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So let's compare these two buildings. So I think you guys are in Sweden. So I think I accidentally made this talk for students in Groningen, but the house, the building on the right was built in the 14th century. So which house do you think is more valuable? It's not really a house. It's used as a maritime museum now. It's one of the oldest buildings in Groningen. I can ride my bike to it. Which one is more valuable? And why are you saying what you're saying?
Well, the market price will probably be higher for the older building because it's a monument, it's a special building, it's old, it's unique. But so will be your maintenance costs. So maintenance costs.
Okay. So there's other factors to buying or selling a house. Okay. So what I'm trying to establish is there's a bunch of different risks from the seller's perspective and from the buyer's perspective. And Olga's starting to list out more risks that she's seeing in terms of being a buyer, right? What do I have to take care of this? Is the value really that high? It's a historic site, so it is very valuable because of the history. But at the same time, it might cost a lot of money to upkeep. Okay, so it might not be worth buying, given what I have for the rest of my parameters, especially given my budget. Okay.
Hobey, do you generally prefer us to talk or to write in the chat?
I prefer talking because it's hard to read and present at the same time. Plus, okay. I think once a COVID vaccine scales to the rest of the world, you guys are going to have to talk face to face, and you're going to be without any communication skills if you just text and type all the time. So it'd be great if you shared your screen and talk.
Okay, let's talk, guys.
Okay.
Maria is also writing here. So it depends also on the culture. In some countries, new might be much more valuable than old.
Okay.
It's always modern stuff, glass, steel, and not the old stones with cracks in them.
Okay. Again, making sure that you understand your preferences going into negotiation is key. All right. And so let's go to the next slide. So this is the basic breakdown of a negotiation. Okay. So someone usually wants to buy something and someone usually wants to sell something. The seller always wants to sell really high and the buyer always wants to buy really low. Okay. And they're going to be far, far away from each other. And then what the negotiation process does is they slowly reveal each other's cards and they see where their pricing sensitivity, if they overlap. And we call that, and if it overlaps, then we call that the zone of potential agreement, where you can start negotiating from, where there can be a deal that exists based on your list of preferences and the other party's list of preferences. Can they overlap and can you come to a compromise? Now, if that zone does not exist, then the saying goes, no deal is better than a bad deal, and you walk away from the deal. But again, you really should try to negotiate, whether it's the price of a house, the price of your salary, if you're in Chinatown and you want to negotiate for a piece of art or something, or if you want to negotiate for the price of a company, an investor wants to invest, or someone wants to buy a company, or you want to purchase a technology and license it. These are all examples of heavy negotiations processes that are going to happen if you own a company. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, usually this is how the valuation of a company grows. So you think about Shark Tank, and how many of you guys actually have ever seen Shark Tank?
Not Shark Tank, only Dragon's Den.
Yes, Shark Tank or Dragon's Den. It's pretty much the same format. Let's see if I can get everybody in my pictures. Okay, most of you aren't sharing your screen, so if you're raising your hand, I can't see it.
Both. Yeah.
But if you watch Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, you're watching a negotiations process live. And what they're trying to negotiate for is when you're talking from a company perspective, when an investor wants to invest, what stage are you at? What's the value of the company? And this is especially difficult if you do not generate revenue. It's very difficult to value you because there's no money representation on how you deliver value to society and if customers are paying you. Can someone tell me what money is? Let's first establish that. What is money?
Cash.
Cash, yes. But fundamentally, what does money represent? What's its value to society?
It allows us to to trade between different services or goods we have, and that we have a one thing with which we can see what it's worth, although it may be very different things. And so you can use it to also buy a lot of other different goods.
Good. Okay, something that has a shared value of 2 parts, exchange currency. So you guys are understanding that money is a convenient falsity we tell ourselves, we as a society opt into. That is completely false. It's just like math, but it makes things more efficient. So we use it. Okay. So for example, we go to a marketplace that has 100 items. If this marketplace has no concept of money and I want to participate in this marketplace, I have to remember over 4,000 conversions to participate in this marketplace. However, if the same 100 item marketplace has the concept of money, I only have to remember 100 conversions, right? So it makes a marketplace scalable. And that's what the efficiency, that's the value of money. And money itself is a technology, okay? We went from grain crops to cows to like little bits of metal, and now we go to paper, and now we have this new stuff called cryptocurrency. But at the end of the day, it's all perceived value. Money is simply a normalized method to value goods and services. All right. And it's getting more and more globally accepted. Okay. Especially with cryptocurrency. But getting back to negotiations, the valuation we give to a company is negotiable, just like any price. Okay. And what that valuation or what that price represents is what is the value of that company? What is the perceived value of that company? And as a company grows, just like as you build a house, it should become more and more valuable. Or the older, the more people you rent the house out to, or the longer you live in it, the house should become more and more valuable. Okay. And you have to also think about this when you're talking about growing a company And you hear people of, okay, I want to invest Series A, and then I want a Series B, and then a Series C, and then the valuation has to constantly go up. What does that actually mean? Well, the company is hitting milestones, whether it's development milestones or later on sales targets, and the valuation of the company goes up. So it costs more money for investors to invest into that company for the same amount of percentage equity. Okay. And this is what this slide is trying to say, is that because the value of the company is going up, the investors have to invest more money to get equity percentage inside of each company. Okay. And if Tanya goes to the next slide, this is the valuation of SpaceX. Okay. It took a long time for Elon Musk to start generating revenue. I think he started SpaceX in 2002. Yeah, August 2002 was his Series A. So he started before that, probably in the 90s. Okay. So Elon Musk says, hey, Russia, I want to buy your old rockets. And then the Russian guy on the other line says, they're X millions and millions of dollars. And Elon Musk says, oh, that's too expensive. And then the Russian says, all right, good luck. What are you going to do? Build your own? And Musk says, yes, I think I'll do that. And here we are 20 years later, he can re-land his own rockets and reuse them. And now he's about to launch his own satellite internet company. Okay. But it took 20 years to get to that point. And he he's on his Series H. Like it doesn't even make sense anymore. But as the company develops more and more technology, the valuation goes up. And so you see the hockey stick trajectory of the valuation. That's essentially what people negotiate every time they want to invest into the company. Okay. And as you see in the post-money valuation and the funding amounts, they go up almost every single time. Okay. And you can see in his Series H, they had to raise some emergency funds to get them to the next milestone because, shit happens in development. Okay.
Sorry, may I have a question here?
Yes.
Is that SpaceX is to build up a spacecraft, right? And
Yes.
if like they still, until 2017, they just have the spaceship and they don't have the revenue within these 15 years. How can they persuade their investors to put a lot of money inside? It's just because of the technology they've already developed, then they win the money, but they don't actually have the product, right? Until now.
Hopes and dreams.
Okay.
That's exactly what Musk was selling, right? He said, hey, I want to go to Mars. And then a bunch of people said, I believe in that. And they invested. But I think Musk is the only person that could do that, right? Because that Series A, he put in his own money. He had $1 billion exit with PayPal. And then instead of sitting back in his investment chair, he started SpaceX. And then he also picked up this little hobby of designing electric vehicles. And that's what became Tesla today. Brand of Musk himself, or greed and fear. Yeah. Musk tries to sell fear to start SpaceX, but his argument there is in 100 million years, the sun is going to become a white dwarf and it's going to boil all the oceans. So humans have to be multi-planetary. I don't think most people buy that. I think that most of them just want to mine minerals past Mars and lasso an asteroid that's worth trillions of dollars. I think that's what he's selling it on.
And just to add on, Hobey gave an example here that in the beginning he said, no deal is better than a bad deal. And that's exactly what Elon Musk did when he was figuring out how to make those initial rockets. He tried to buy them. He knew that the cost would basically drive his company into the ground. So he said, nope. And he made them himself.
Okay. And so every time someone invests, like every time one of those series happened, there was a negotiation process, probably a very hardcore negotiation process, especially when you ask somebody for $1 billion and really you have no revenue. Okay. So SpaceX is a unicorn. This is not a traditional example of a company with investment. You only see this in Silicon Valley, kind of on the West Coast in California. Normally, you're not going to have a 10, 15-year term to generate revenue, much less, I don't think SpaceX is cash flow positive by any means. And there's probably a lot of debt in that company. But this is completely true. What Wen is trying to point out is you're asking for investment because you don't have the revenue to fund your own development. Okay. So that's what investment is intended to cover. And what you're selling the investors on is essentially hopes and dreams, but you have to word it such that it's very clear. There's a clear value proposition. They're convinced that once you develop the product, you have customers and the sales projections make sense. Okay. But at the core of it, it's really hopes and dreams, because every business pitch and every business plan, all these fancy financials, everything that we do, it's all fiction. None of it is true. Okay. So at the end of the day, it's hopes and dreams. All right, next slide. This is an example of the effect of having an effective negotiation process within your company to do sales. Okay, companies that do not have a formal negotiations process, they actually net negative 63% of what they could charge. So they're missing out on 63% of their revenue. Whereas companies with a somewhat formal negotiation process and formal negotiation process, they experience a 16 to 40% increase in revenue generation per account. Okay. And why is that? If you can go into, it's almost like playing poker. You have to know the other person's hand. And if you know the other person's hand, you can wisely make better bets. Okay. And in industry, what we call this is value-based pricing. You know what the customer values your product at, and so you charge close to that value. If you do not know what the value is, then you have to do what's called cost-based pricing. And what cost-based pricing is you look at your own internal cost structure, and then you just charge a percentage on top of that, so you make more than you spend. And so it keeps you afloat, but treading water and swimming is not the same thing. And so a lot of engineers with technical backgrounds, they tend to have no formal negotiations process, and they tend to use cost-based approaches to pricing. And that's why a lot of tech companies that are only have tech co-founders, they often run out of cash very early on, and they never get to compete in the market, even though they may have had a better technology. But those that are good at sales and marketing and have balanced teams, they probably get enough, they get way more revenue into their company, and they have more gas to go further. Okay. But again, you have to have a formal negotiation strategy implemented, and that's understanding what your customer is, and that's studying it. Okay. Can we go to the next slide? I think it's.
Yeah, hold on. Olga had a question. So she said, how do you learn to see the other people's hand on the other side of the table?
That's the next slide.
Perfect.
Okay. So how do you become successful at negotiations? How do you figure out other people's hands? Can anybody take a guess first?
Do the research beforehand, before you go to the table. Try to figure out what they want and what exactly you want from them.
Very good. I think that's the answer. Tanya, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's basically knowing that you both want to come to an agreement, and you just, exactly what you said, think from the other person's perspective and think, okay, if I were in their shoes, what would I want? And then you see what they would want, what you want, and how you can both get what you want, but also it's it's only a good negotiation when both people walk away feeling like they got kind of screwed over. So just is what it is.
But does it actually mean that you really have to know all of their business, all of their ins and outs, like become really expert in their, affairs in order to be able to imagine what they would like from you and how they can use what you're offering? Like, does it come with like 1,000 years of experience?
I would say it's more knowing your own value and knowing why you want to work with them. And then from there, you can, like, you're never actually going to know if you're right. But you can see where you're wrong when you come to a point where you thought you would agree, where you thought you would disagree, and there's nothing there. And then you have to dig down a bit more and talk to them.
Yeah, to negotiate a deal that matters. So we're not talking like these micro negotiations that you go through like daily tasks. When you talk about the zone of potential agreement, like what Tanya is saying is when the negotiations start, you're this far away. And the zone is maybe like a little bit in the middle, but you say a little bit and then you learn a little bit and then you come back with more terms. And then you adjust, and then you adjust, and then you adjust, and then you adjust, and then you adjust. And then when you get to the middle, you might find a zone of agreement. But this entire process is predicated on listening. It's entirely predicated on empathy. Okay, so I want you to really pay attention to what Tanya said, that you have to put yourself on the other side's shoes. And that's the only way that you're going to become an effective negotiator, is if you listen and empathize and really figure out, okay, why did they inch this way when I said something? Why did they inch more? Why did they go away when I said this? Okay, you have to really listen to what is making them move. And it happens very quickly. Like in a 3-hour call, it might happen like this. This is the negotiation process, okay? And then you might net this progress in that 3-hour call. And then you go chill for 2 weeks, you work on and try to reorganize your thoughts. And then you start here again. And then you do another 3-hour call. And then it moves like this. And then maybe like you net a little bit more progression. And you do that for a couple months. And then you get to like here. And then you're so close. And that's when you start to push, hey, let's get a term sheet signed. Okay.
Yeah.
Like it's never easy when it comes to something that's very valuable.
And the listening is also extremely important, because we've found sometimes people want the same thing, but they're saying it in a different way. And then you have a 40-minute discussion when at the end you say, aren't you just saying this? And they just wanted it written down a different way. And then after 40 minutes, where you're paying an attorney $250 an hour as a startup rate, normally like $350 or $400 an hour, you just wasted $200 to $300 because you were saying the same thing and not listening.
But essentially what Wen is saying is true, okay? So you do your research. Like if you were to buy a house, you look up the location, you look at all the other property values around it. What are other people selling at? You ask your friends, hey, what was your experience buying a house? And then you go on Google, you look up the real estate agent and you look at their Google reviews, Yelp reviews, all the types of reviews that you can, and you figure out as much as you can from them, okay? And it's the same thing with negotiating your salary. What is everyone else getting paid in the company? What are other entry levels getting paid? What's the industry standard? Do some of your friends work at that company? How much, like what is the going market value? Trying to get in as much research as possible. So what Tanya is saying, know your value, but also understand what the normal is. Okay. And again, you're going to do this. Okay. And somehow you meet in the middle. And the more you do it, the more negotiations you've been through and have seen, the faster you can the faster and more linear you can get to that zone of agreement. Okay. Well, at least that's how it's supposed to work. But we'll tell you after we go through more negotiations and we monitor the speed and how we do deals. But I hope it goes up because I don't want to go through that again.
If I may cut in a little bit, time unfortunately flies very fast and we have 4 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll jump. We're pretty much done, but we have one more slide, and I think this is a good class discussion. Yeah, do your homework. So just know your financials. That's what the slide is about when it comes to company valuation. Next slide. Benchmarking with other companies. So this is like Uber and all their competition. How much were they worth? And so if you're trying to sell your company, look for benchmarks. Same thing with negotiating salary or looking for negotiating a price for a house. Okay. Normal research. All right. Next. I think this is a recap. And then next. Okay, so I want you guys to think about this because this is also a common problem in technology. So the two biggest negotiations people are probably going to talk about in technology companies is one, valuation and like terms of investment. So we kind of talked about that, and we'd have to go through an entire negotiations talk and valuations talk and a seminar to really give you guys a lot more detail. But the other type of negotiation is often with licensing. Okay. So I want you to think you have technology A. Let's say that you have a small biologic or some little molecule that cures a bunch of diseases. And we have technology B. So Tanya and I have a novel nanoparticle that can load a bunch of small molecules onto it and use it as a drug delivery vehicle. Okay. Patients can only be helped by A and B, right? A molecule by itself has drug delivery issues. A drug delivery vehicle is useless without a drug. Okay. A and B are worthless alone. But patients can only benefit from A plus B. Okay. You have spent €1 million to develop A. There are other combinations you can combine A with to sell to more patients. So you want to be able to work with other drug companies to develop multifaceted drug compounds. And you also want to test different drug delivery vehicles for different diseases. Okay. We have spent also €1 million to develop B. There are other combinations we can combine B with to sell to more patients. Okay. Because we can load a bunch of different drugs onto our nanoparticle, not just yours. Okay. So we can't just be in an exclusive relationship with you, and you can't be in an exclusive relationship with us, because that's bad business for both of us. However, we can attack this one marketplace together, but we also have to figure out a payment schedule that makes sense, because we've both spent a lot of money into developing this thing, and we both need to see money return. Okay. So I want you guys to discuss for a couple minutes, might hold you over for a couple minutes. How do we come to an agreement that allows us to trust each other and work together to pursue A plus B, but flexible enough to allow us to pursue other customers separately as well? So for instance, you want to partner with other drugs and we want to partner with other drugs to look at different patients with other diseases. Okay. How would you guys structure that deal?
You might argue that for this one disease, you are exclusive, but not for other diseases.
Okay. And so in licensing, we call that the field of use or scope of the license. Okay. So we would license each other's technologies to ourselves within a given scope. And so we don't collaborate with anybody else on this particular disease. However, all the other diseases is open game because we don't really care about them. A plus B only works for this disease anyway. Okay. And what other thing do we need to include in this licensing agreement.
If Z and Y are, well, they have the same disease application, then it might can be like if A and B, we're exclusive partnership, then we can offer special prices to each other, but it's also opening for you to cooperate with one another company, but with less flexible price that you can deal with from price strategy.
I like the flexibility in price. So what Wen is talking about is a payment schedule. So we will work together. We will financially forecast how many patients we can sell to, and we each have an equal say in the price to make sure we make a return on the development and investment we put up to develop our respective parts. Okay. So like company A cannot go off and sell their drug and only make the money to recoup their investment. And we can't just go off and sell the drug to make the money to recoup our investment. We have to both discuss price and make sure that both of us are able to eat with the meal that we've cooked together. And that's the basics on negotiating a licensing agreement, is that you have to agree on a field of use and a revenue model that makes sense, whether that's royalties or shared revenue, whatever. But you need at least those two things. And then because of everything else that can light this agreement on fire, your licensing agreement will turn into 30 pages. But those are the two core things you need. Tanya, anything else to add? That was the end.
No, let me see if there's anything in the chat. Yeah, no, those are the two core things that you need, but I don't know if Hobey said this already, but when we negotiated this, it took us 10 months and 10,000 euros to get to that. So it really takes a lot of what Hobey was saying, of this and talking to each other and understanding each other. And those other terms are also very important to the deal, even though they are quite standard a lot of the times. They do have a heavy effect on the outcome.
Yeah, and those are the devil in the details that you guys are going to experience in real industry. But like I said, those two terms are the most important terms, but the agreement can be like 30, 50, 100 pages. And it's all the stuff that could happen. Like what if one of your department, what if one of the developers, the CEO dies? That's happened before. One of my mentors, they were invested in a company. They invested, I think, $13 million into a medical device company. And the CEO or one of the C-level execs died, and they just disbanded the company. Like that can happen. Or if you work with a contract manufacturer, this happened with one of my first startups that I was involved in. What if the contract manufacturer says, hey, like the CEO retires, his son takes over, and the son doesn't know what he's doing, and essentially says, hey, we're not doing development for you anymore. If you'd like for us to develop your product more, pay us $20,000. What happens if that happens? So you should probably have a termination clause in there and clauses to prevent that from happening. Okay. So there's just many things that can happen that you literally can't ever think of. Like when Tanya and I made our first operating agreement, which is the shareholders agreement that you use it tells you like all the decisions, how the shares and equity and all the company is set up. It's like a 4-hour meeting where they walk you through like all these outrageous scenarios. Like what if Tanya dies? What happens to her shares? What if you die? What happens to your shares? What if Hobey gets divorced and his wife takes half of his shares? What happens then? Like those things happen. So that's what most of a contract and agreement is, risk mitigation with those outrageous cases, but they happen, so you have to mitigate them. But I think you guys know the basics, and now you guys just have to go out in the real world and make mistakes and learn. So sorry for holding you guys over 6 minutes, but I think that's it, Olga.
Thank you so much. And I think we always imagine negotiation is very, kind of something else, something difficult, something special process, and it actually is. And when you look at it back, it's like, okay, well, this looks pretty intuitive, right? So you get some kind of exclusive license, and then you just calculate all these scenarios. But what the scenarios, how these scenarios, and also taking into account, I think a lot of people, especially if they are beginners in negotiation, beginners in any profession, in any startup, they often forget that there is a bottom to the zone of agreement. There is that part which is your own value, your non-negotiable value, your, let's say, starting point. And that is also very important learning in negotiation practices in terms of, okay, trying to understand the other part, listen to what they want, but also try to keep your own grounds and develop them and try to negotiate something in between and not just accept the conditions of the other party, however mighty, scary, and knowledgeable it might look. I see there is some more, I think, mentions in the chat right now going further. Yes, it takes a lot of self-confidence, and we are thanking you, the audience is thanking you for the interesting and good examples, interactivity, and yeah, suggesting to make clauses in the contracts and doing things. Raul has one last question. Go ahead, Raul.
Thank you very much. Sorry. I was wondering about your relationship with Tanya, because as we have seen a lot of you two, you were friends, and now that has evolved into a different kind of relationships and branches. So that has made you like stronger together, or just are you friends also, or you can differentiate between these things, or it's better not to have companies with friends or something?
So Tanya, I've known Tanya for over 10 years now. We met in engineering school and we've always been good friends. I'm trying to look back. I don't think I've ever started a company that with someone who is not a friend, because I think the core thing you need between business partners is trust. And yeah, I'm trying to think of an example where we started a company with a complete stranger.
Well, we almost did.
Yeah, that was the only, well, not the only bad experience, but one of the most horrible experiences that we've had.
It was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, I would, that's kind of like the most common question we get is Hobey and Tanya dating? No, but we've been good friends for over 10 years.
Every time.
Yeah, every time, including investor meetings.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it just depends on your personality type. I know people that are married and they have companies together. So I don't like, maybe that's too intense. But I've also seen married people start companies together and it ended in business divorce and real divorce. And I'm not sure which one was nastier. So it depends on your personality type and how mature you are and how much you trust each other. And so as long as you have good communication between yourselves, I think friends are some of the best people to start companies with, because you have innate built trust and you kind of already know them, versus like going on, like, how do you even look for a stranger to start a company with? Yeah.
Yeah. But I would say that it is important, if you start a company with a friend, to differentiate time when you're talking about the business and time when you're friends, just friends, and you don't worry about the business, because otherwise they get convoluted. And like Hobey and I were saving money and we were living together. And when we were doing the business and living together and constantly around each other, it got really stressful for some time. And things started to mix, like the business, and like when I just see him chilling in the living room, I was like, hey, we should talk about this, or him to me, and it was just too much. So I would say, if you do start it with a friend, make sure you say, here is when we're talking about business, and here is when you're just my friend.
yeah, again, that it goes back to having good communication and being able, having that trust where you can have those types of difficult conversations and not taking it personally. So if you have trouble doing that, I highly advise you not to start a company with a friend. But if you have a good friend, you know, friends are some of the best people to start a company with, again, because you just kind of know what they're like already.
Okay, Raul, thanks you for the answer. And if there are no more highly burning questions, I'd like to thank Hobey and Tanya for these 2 meetings, because we actually had 2 Innovation Tuesdays together. One which explained their journey, and this one where they focused specifically on what do you have to pay attention to when you're negotiating and what is actually negotiation. So thank you so much, guys. It has been very interesting and very interactive, and great experience and great cases that you have been sharing with us. I would like to maybe quickly check with our hosts. Ulrika, Lena, do we have to say something more before we wrap up this session?
I think, Ulrika, do you have something you want to say? Okay, then I'll say that I think it's been a pleasure having these 4 innovation days together with Groningen University under the umbrella of EIT Health. And we're looking forward to come back next year again with another part of Innovation Tuesdays in November, maybe. We'll see what will come. Stay tuned and we will let you know what we're doing. So thank you.
And thanks everybody for joining us, for your questions and your participation in this webinar. Thank you and have a good evening.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.